Today we're going to talk about the next installment of the Meghan and Harry show that we're going to be talking about. We've done a couple of videos on them so far. Greg, what are the videos we're going to watch today?
Yeah, this is the first episode of Harry and Meghan from Netflix. That's the video. Mark, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so this is the first episode of part one. Obviously, there's part two. That's got 3 episodes. So essentially, we could do 6 of these for you if you're interested. So if you're interested in this, make sure you subscribe so you're notified and let us know you want us to do the rest of the videos, and we'll do that for you.
Wednesday, the something of March. We've just finished our 2 weeks. Our final push, our last stint of royal engagements. It's really hard to look back on it now and go, what on earth happened? Like, how did we end up here?
Fair to say Britain is in shock this morning.
A dramatic and shocking announcement from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
Announcing they're taking a step back from their royal duties.
Prince Harry appears to be on a, quote, trajectory of self-destruction.
H is in London and I'm here. I don't even know where to begin.
My job is to keep my family safe. By the nature of being born into this position, and with everything else that comes with it, and the level of hate that has been stirred up in the last 3 years, especially against my wife and my son.
As is my mom outside with Archie.
I'm genuinely concerned for the safety of my family. Stay.
I just really want to get to the other side of all of this. I don't know what to say anymore.
This is about duty and service, and I feel as though being part of this family, it is my duty to uncover this exploitation and bribery that happens within our media.
Unfortunately, in us standing for something, they are destroying us.
This isn't just about our story. This has always been so much bigger than us.
This does not represent what London stands for.
Control of this country.
No one knows the full truth. We know the full truth. The institution knows the full truth, and the media know the full truth because they've been in on it. And I think anybody else in my situation would have done exactly the same thing.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Okay, what have I got? Look, clearly beautifully produced, this documentary. I watched all of it, and I do think it is a lovely piece of documentary production. And so that means we are going to get moved, we are going to get manipulated, not necessarily in a good way or a bad way. I mean, that's up to you to decide, but it is going to be manipulative. Let's focus in on the music, because it has a rhythm to it, it has cadence, and it's part of the non-verbal information that we're viewing these photographs and this and what people are saying and their tone of voice via. Lovely score there by Gil Talmy, but it's rather reminiscent of Michael Nyman's The Piano. So it's romantic, it's epic, it's kind of from a big glamorous film. Also super reminiscent of John Lunn's Downton Abbey as well. Just go there and listen to that, and then listen to the music for Downton Abbey. So it's already trying to evoke something quite modern and Hollywood, but at the same time, something very kind of romantic and epic and aristocratic for sure. But what's the kind of feeling of it? Pain, hurt, aching. And so if you're feeling that yourself, it may not be what they're saying. If you're feeling that pain, and I know Greg's going through quite a lot of pain watching this today, but it may not be what they're saying or what they're emoting. It may be what the music is doing. So There's that. Interesting words from Harry there. Final push. Very military term, the final push. So he's already using army talk here. And then we see upcoming images of newspapers talking about declares war, race war. So they've managed to montage these things together in a beautiful way. There he is at the Windsor suite, private suite at the airport. I don't know why they decided to tell us that they're at the Windsor suite, very private, exclusive suite at the airport there. But look, black and white photographs, nostalgic, romantic, this idea of hiding and exposure together, uncover and covert, all these images, they're either exposing or they're hiding. So they start off this whole thing with juxtaposition of that. Again, it's intriguing. Okay, the only bit of nonverbal that I really want to pick up on here is his look and the tonality of "and my son." And there's a pain in that. And I think he's suggesting that the attacks on his son or potential attacks on his son went too far. That's all I got on that one. Greg, what did you see there?
Yeah, so I have a little bias here. I'll tell you, I'd rather drink cooking oil than watch all 6 of these. So you must know, panelists, I really love you, or I wouldn't be doing this, just to warn you. Let me start off by saying what I notice here is 2 very different things, 2 very different approaches already right out of the gate, 2 very different ways of approaching the storytelling. But the first one is, did anybody pay attention to the date? This video started in March of 2020 after the January 2020 walkout. That means this was planned. That means they had a plan for sharing all their little incremental steps along the way. So a data point, does it mean anything? Well, we'll figure that out. A couple of body language things here to see. I would say one of the more interesting ones is his hands are curled when he's at the door of a vehicle she's in getting ready to leave. We typically associate curled hands unless there's something in them with apprehension. People close their hands when they're apprehensive. Little kids do it all the time. You can see them do that when something happens. Not balling a fist, but just curling your hands. Kind of an odd mark. You always talk about sweaters and people doing that with a cup of coffee and all that kind of stuff. But we see that. We see him engage the camera in this diary thing they're doing, but he's not as frame savvy as we see when she goes in. She's a camera hog. She is very attentive to what's going on, and she knows where she's at in the frame. I see real disdain in his face when he says he went too far with his kid. I agree with you, Mark. Probably the best piece of body language. He also then starts to talk about being on a mission, and it's about turning over all this stuff around exploitation and bribery by the media and by the family. This is going to be a long story because this has little to do with them walking away, and I think has a lot to do with something they want to get done with the story. I think it's bigger than him walking away from simply being born into a family where he didn't have a choice. He could have done that and been quiet and disappeared, but that's not what they chose to do. They chose to not be quiet and disappear. They chose instead to become, and I have a personal opinion that they could not be the most important and most famous royals, but they can be the most important and most famous ex-royals. We'll see her. She stays very focused. If you pay attention to this very candid camera angle that she has, when she says, get to the other side, she makes hard eye contact with the camera. Then she goes into this brave face and it breaks into a cry. She's an actor, pretty well known, was in a series. Let's see how this all plays out. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, one thing that I believe we're not going to see here is them being challenged. They won't be challenged on anything. There's a hard narrative here. And as far as this episode, there's not a lot of clips of the people actually talking. They're overlaying a bunch of B-roll and photos and stuff while these people are talking. Since you guys got a lot of the behaviors that are in this thing, I'm going to be covering in many of these clips what I might just dub as behavioral subscript of what's actually going on. So we might cover a lot of that here. So in this clip, we hear no one knows the full truth. And this is coming from someone making a documentary about themselves who is also at the same time unwilling to share that truth with you. And when he says anyone in my position would have done the same thing, this is a socialization attempt right here. He's saying, I won't give you the truth at all. Even though you're watching this documentary, you think that truth is eventually going to come out because this is in episode 1. You're not going to hear it. And even though I'm making a movie about myself, you're not going to hear it. But if you had that truth, you'll have to take my word that you would have made the same choices. So I think what's being laid out here is the narrative for the entire rest of all of the other episodes that are going to be coming out. If you were in this position, you would have done the same thing we did. And I think that's one large piece of the narrative, is to socialize this and make people feel like I would have done the same thing, and get them from royalty to celebrity, which is the switches. They wanted to turn off the royalty one and turn on the celebrity switch. I think that's exactly what's happening. Scott?
All right. I think in the first 4 seconds, we're seeing some classics here. He's fiddling with his fingers. We can talk about that as pacification gesture or behavior, because anything you do that's repetitive like that, Joe Navarro coined that as a pacification behavior, self-pacification. He's looking around like he's searching for information, and we see that extra face where he knows he's being videoed. Obviously he knows, because he's the one doing it, but you put this pleasant look on your face, like we always, even though we know we're being videoed, we try to forget about it. We're still sitting there going, these little looks on our faces, because we can see ourselves. We're all looking at ourselves in this thing. And that's what he's doing too. So it's not really a natural face you'll see him have out in the wild, unless there's a camera on him where he knows you're watching him or taking a look at him. I think that a hum he does is to give the viewer some time to look at him and watch him go through this emotion, watch him experience this. Let's see him go, see that hum when he talks about his kid. So I think that's kind of self-serving there. His blink rate goes through the roof, and it's at times it's almost like he's batting him and flirting with the camera. You know, we'll see her batter eyes here in a little while she's flirting with him while they're sitting on a couch. So that's we'll be seeing that. And then on her part, she said she's created this scene in the bathroom. I think it's the bathroom, maybe the kitchen. I can't tell. It looks like the bathroom, I'm assuming, because she's got her hair in a towel. And she's sitting there with her leg up, and she's just like thinking about what she's going to say and emotionally how it's coming across to her. And she's talking really soft. Her tone is soft. Her cadence is really slow. Her volume is low. This is Mark's favorite part. And coming to what you said about that, Greg, about her being a camera hog. Remember, if you can't see the camera can't see you. I heard my brother say that once. He was making fun of somebody. But she understands the scene. So that's what she's put together. She understands what would fit here in this scenario, or in this group of videos we're going to be watching that she's done personally. She understands what a scene looks like. So that's what we're seeing. And if you'll listen to her, she talks about how things look. It looks to me like people will communicate in one of 3 ways most of the time. We all communicate uniquely. We all have our own way of communicating, but people will talk about things from a visual perspective, from an auditory perspective, or from a kinesthetic perspective. Most of the time, those are the 3 most everybody uses. The visual perspective, you'll hear people talk and they'll say things like, that looks good to me. I see what you're saying. Those kind of things. Someone who's into music or is into the auditory part of living and pay attention to that the most, they'll say, that sounds good to me. It sounds like something I'd like to do. I hear what you're saying. And the kinesthetic person, they're people in how things feel and touching things and all that. And they will say, that makes me feel like this. He's got a prickly personality, or he's a little rough around the edges, those kind of things. So in this case, she set up a scene, because that's what she's good at, to get that emotion across that she's sad and that she's having a hard time there. Now and then the next part for him, his cadence is a little bit faster, and his blink rate is a little bit lower. His volume is louder, and his diction is really, really clear as he's talking about this. And then he introduces hate along with his son in this part. Now this, I think he's introduced that to help his narrative, to help fortify what he said about how the world hates them now. You know, they used to not, but now they do. The people hate them because of who they are and this secret that's supposed to be happening, whatever this secret is, which apparently we're going to, hopefully, I don't know if we find out or not. I didn't watch all 3 episodes yet. So I don't know. Greg, but Chase, you said we don't find out, right?
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. So that's what happens there. I think he's just reinforcing his narrative with that there. And then comes back to her. And again, she's acting. And it's all fake emotion at that point. Then he talks about his duty and service. That's so important to him, is duty and service. Well, maybe he had duty and service when he was a royal, but he's not anymore. So what could his duty and service be? What is it? He doesn't have one. So he says his main thing is to protect his family. That's my job now, is to protect. Well, dude, guess what? Your job is always to protect your family. We all do that. Everybody does it. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Don't make a big deal about it. The hell, man. That's what you're supposed to do. It's what men do. They protect their family. I'm going old school notes. Then back to the beginning of this one, we see something we don't see very often, and I thought it was fairly odd. We see this smile happen, and it starts on one side and it goes up as contempt, and then the other side comes up, and it happens really quickly. And it's almost like like that as it comes up, as he smiles. And that's odd, because right after that, it just disappears, not long after that. We talk about this all the time. When we see someone who's showing you an emotion that they're supposed to really be feeling, they'll as it changes from one emotion to the other, they will blend together and it turns into that emotion. Here, we don't see that. This one sort of does that as the mouth goes up to this weird smile, but then it drops completely after that. So it goes away. So maybe he's got a lot of emotions fighting in there with each other because of the way he's been raised. He's been raised, look, man, when you go out here, everybody's going to be looking at you. Here's how you handle this. Here's the way you act. You smile, you sit up straight, you do this, you do that, you do that. And so maybe as he's grown up, he's learned how to get a hold of his emotions so they don't leak out as strongly as ours might. But we do see leakage, and I think that's what we're seeing. We see these really quick smiles and things disappear from his face. Not that he's being fake. Those emotions are just fighting each other to get through at that point. I think he's trying to control what's happening here, control the narrative. This is his first step into controlling the narrative of what he wants us to think about him and his family and what's really happening. So that's all I got. We're good.
Anybody else think this was a press conference to say I hate attention?
That's good. That's good.
That was good.
I'm going to give that to you, Mark. You nailed it.
Wednesday, the something of March. We've just finished our 2 weeks. Our final push, our last stint of royal engagements. It's really hard to look back on it now and go, what on earth happened? Like, how did we end up here?
Fair to say Britain is in shock this morning.
A dramatic and shocking announcement from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
Announcing they're taking a step back from their royal duties.
Prince Harry appears to be on a, quote, trajectory of self-destruction.
H is in London and I'm here. I don't even know where to begin.
My job is to keep my family safe. By the nature of being born into this position and with everything else that comes with it and the level of hate that has been stirred up in the last 3 years, especially against my wife and my son.
Is my mom outside with Archie?
I'm genuinely concerned for the safety of my family. Stay.
I just really want to get to the other side of all of this. I don't know what to say anymore.
This is about duty and service, and I feel as though being part of this family, it is my duty to uncover this exploitation and bribery that happens within our media.
Unfortunately, in us standing for something, they are destroying us.
This isn't just about our story. This has always been so much bigger than us.
This does not represent what London stands for.
Control of this country.
No one knows the full truth. We know the full truth. The institution knows the full truth, and the media know the full truth because they've been in on it. And I think anybody else in my situation would have done exactly the same thing. nervous. Why am I nervous?
I just want to start with this little moment. I don't think you guys have seen this before, and I just thought I would share it with you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Megan, so much.
And looking forward to watching the self-esteem workshop right now. Yes.
Do you remember it?
No.
Number one song to pick you up.
Oh my gosh, I was just listening to it before I left.
It's a Nina Simone song, and it's called How It Feels to Be Free.
Oh,
it's
I don't
so
know
good.
it. Okay, I'll look that up for sure.
Fiercest female character on TV.
Who do I say? Olivia Pope?
Olivia Pope.
Prince William or Prince Harry?
I don't know. Harry. Harry? Sure.
Sure. What year was that?
October 2015.
October 2015?
Less than a year.
Before we met? Funny, I'm sorry. I, of course, choose you.
Okay. Wait. This just, again, shows how little you knew. They look like how far we've come.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Not a lot on this one. I'm just going to hit a couple of notes. It's interesting for me. We're going to see a baseline for what she does when she's talking to someone. She does that compression of the muscles here that we usually associate with the knit brow when she's just normally talking. There's no reason for her to have that when she's talking to this person who's interviewing her. There's one place where he does this kind of tilt and look under his brow almost in disbelief. Hey, that was less than a year before we met. I'm not going to go much further than that. I'm just going to say, look, whether he knows that she was interested in him at that point or not, who knows? I just think that he's amused. He actually shows some real joy in his face, some real happiness in his face. And then she's actually showing some concern a little bit before the video plays. And then she does that data intake face. We'll see that again later when she's talking normally to people versus when she's projecting something. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Well, before the action starts, she's kind of looks like Harry does. She's sitting there kind of a little bit nervous, but as soon as they say, oh, take a look at this, that head comes forward and she comes out some. That's the face she makes where it's supposed to be the Meghan on film or video face or taking pictures of her. That's the face she has. That's the one she's practiced. That's her show face, in other words. He is a little bit nervous at the top. But this starts to bother me the further we go because we're seeing, again, a blend of three expressions at this point. We're seeing this fake surprise on her face. Then we see this concern, but it's all being masking a smile or a happy face. So we're seeing all three of these expressions fighting each other. And the very back one is the smile that I think she's trying to hide because she loves nothing more than looking at herself, I believe. And this is the ultimate for her. It's her being videoed, watching herself on video. It's the narcissist's dream. I mean, she's peaked right there. There we are. She has it at the beginning of the show. And then we're seeing these little micro expressions of her when she's trying not to smile. If you get close, you'll see it almost flutter there on the sides as she's trying to hold that down. Harry is actually really inquisitive about what's going to happen. I don't think he's seen this before because he looks like he's wondering what happened. He has that concern, like, what are we talking about? Is this a trap? Is it what's happening? Is this real? So he looks pretty good as it goes along. He's really focused, and I think he's not worried, but he's concerned about what's on there. And then when it starts, he looks all proud of her. And we see a real smile there. I think it's a true Duchenne smile when he starts smiling at her. And she looks back at him, and she does hers too, her Meghan smile. And as she looks at it, she says she's not sure if she remembers it or not. And you know what? At first I thought, oh, come on, you've got to remember you're on TV or whatever. But how many times have us four been on TV or an interview and you really don't remember what was said? I was on one the other day with Robin Dreek. We talked about those people, that horrible thing where those children, those girls and guy got killed in Idaho. And I don't remember really what all we were talking about. He probably doesn't either. I know we talked afterwards, but that's all I remember. So I believe her on that point. I believe she may not remember what she said on this. So I think this might be really surprised. I didn't wink. It just looked like a wink right there. I'm not a winker. So then, let me see. I've lost my place in here. I'm back to notes. This again reinforces his narrative, because he says, when she says, the girl asked her, well, would you pick Harry or what's the other one's name?
William.
Would you pick Harry or William? She said, Harry. That reinforces his narrative, or their narrative, as she didn't know who he was before then. And she might not have really paid attention to that at that point, because she says she never Googled him or anything. But I'll bet you she did. Once she found out that he was interested in her, that's when the Googling started. You can rest assured, because they said, check it out, man. This Prince wants to talk to you. She's like, Prince, which one? Who is it? Which one? Okay, I know who they are. And she Googled him, and she says she didn't. So, but that backs up their narrative, him saying, see, I know you didn't know me before then. You're into me, not who you thought I was. You're into me. Then we're seeing some true emotions and real expressions from him, again, with his Duchenne smile. You hear us talk about the Duchenne smile. What that is this. Back in the late 1800s, there was a guy named Duchenne de Boulogne. How do you say his name correctly, Mark? You say it better than I do.
Duchenne of Boulogne.
Well, okay. I'll just call him Duchenne de Boulogne.
I don't know whether he was actually from Bologna, though, because I think he was from not there, essentially. It's like a French or Swiss German or something like that, but not.
All right. Well, he was the first guy to really start doing deep dives into facial expressions and if they were real or if they were fake. And what he found, and if you look, he's got pictures, no videos. He's got pictures of him with these little sticks with electrodes on them, and he shocks this guy in the face, and those muscles contract and they make these different expressions. And what he found was a real smile and the fake smile are different. And you know it by this. A lot of people say, oh, you can tell by the wrinkles on the side of their eyes that's a real smile. Nope. It's got to be the right kind of wrinkle. It can't just be the wrinkle. You and I can squint. Anybody on here can squint and smile at the same time. And you say, oh, that's a Duchenne smile. No, it isn't. Because a real smile, the brain makes sure those squints come down at an angle like that on the inside like that. When we squint, it just comes up like that and goes flat. So you have to know what to look for. You have to get good at doing it. It's not as easy as these people say. As I say, oh, you can always tell by this. You got to pay attention and know what you're looking for. You're looking for that thing to come in at an angle like that. That's the key there. Also, I'll put a link below to that so you can find out who Duchenne de Boulogne is, or Bologna, however you say his name correctly. And so you'll be able to learn more about that. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so I think this is a scene that's about the idea of surprise, and I agree. I think there is some real surprise in there. But here's the big thing here is when you control your media, even the traps are set in your favor. And that's what's happened here is a trap has been set, but the producer here has set a wonderful trap that they know is most likely going to play out really well to their advantage. So I think Meghan is a little bit like, okay, I don't remember this. What happened here? We see that because after she gets the first one right, her hands go down and she stabilizes herself. She now controls that. She releases on that. So, and he says, yes, of course, that shows how little, with some very strong tease on there, which is very kind of West London Harrow, how little you knew. It plays absolutely to the advantage of the narrative, which is that narrative, Scott, that you were saying of she knew nothing about him or the royal family, and she didn't even Google him. Well, we do find out in this particular documentary that, yes, maybe she didn't Google him, but she went straight on his Instagram and looked at his Instagram. So there is in that original interview, she said, I didn't Google him, but she didn't go, I didn't Google him, but I did immediately look at his Instagram feed because we had mutual friends. I was able to get access to that private feed and go through his photographs and work out, is this somebody I could align with? So, if the question had been, but did you search through his social media? She'd have had to have said, yeah, absolutely, I did. She did better than perhaps Google him. She searched his private, she had access to his private social media. Anyway, look, straight into this example here of how in control of this they are. Very different from Oprah, which is meant to be quite a friendly interview, and yet it kind of went a little bit out of control for them. traps opened up for them. Not necessarily that Oprah set those traps, but the traps weren't really organized. Here, even the traps are organized. Brilliant, brilliant spin. Chase, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, I agree with you guys on there's a couple genuine smiles in there. There are many fake ones, though. Very many fake ones. And I think she is hesitant to touch his face at one point in this. And I think this is weird. It's maybe likely due to a lack of a smile or enjoyment about the comment, but she is reaching up to maybe touch his face and then drops her hand down onto her leg. He continues this lack of humor to illustrate what he took from a clip meant to be funny, and like he took the humor out of it. And there was some digital flexion. The moment that she was talking about choosing him instead of William, you could see his hand tighten up. It's dangling right between his legs. You can see his hand tighten up. This is classic digital flexion. It's a perfect, quintessential example of it. And right when he says, or right when he does this little digital flexion maneuver, this is when he says, "This shows how little you knew." He removes his arm from her at this precise moment. And this is one signal, not a cluster. So what we're seeing here is just little small micro signals here, when what we're traditionally looking for are a little mountain or a little hill of behaviors, multiple behaviors. I'm sure the internet will be full of people who are absolutely certain they know what this means. I'm not. The behavior in this clip almost conveys a desire to stay away from anything enjoyable and to avoid any discussion of things that are good in their life or even what they're thankful for, which I think might be what the viewers are wanting them to discuss once and for all. I think people are waiting to hear, like, yeah, this is pretty good. I'm thankful for some of this stuff. That's all I got.
I think she didn't touch him because of the makeup.
I saw that too. Oh, he didn't have a bunch, but her hand would have contacted mostly facial hair.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Should we do some intros or on the next one?
Yeah,
let's do them now.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it right now. If you don't know who we are, we're the Behavior Panel. I'm Scott Rouse. I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I train law enforcement and the military in interrogation and body language. And I created the #1 online body language course, Body Language Tactics, with Greg Hartley. Mark?
I'm Mark Bowden. I'm an expert in human behavior and body language, help people all over the world to stand out, win trust, gain credibility every time they communicate, including some of the leaders of the G7. Chase.
Hey, I'm Chase Hughes, did 20 years in the U.S. military, wrote the #1 best-selling book on behavior profiling, influence, and persuasion. You can type my name into your app store to get training right now. Greg?
Greg Hartley. I'm a former Army interrogator, interrogation instructor, resistance to interrogation instructor. I've written 10 books on body language and behavior, and I spend most of my time on Wall Street corporate America. Oh, and finished, we put together, Scott and I, the bodylanguagetactics.com course, which has become a #1.
Excellent. Oh, you beat you, Mark. Sorry, dude.
I'm nervous. Why am I nervous?
I just want to start with this little moment. I don't think you guys have seen this before, and I just thought I would share it with you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Megan, so much. And looking forward to watching the self-esteem workshop right now. Yes.
Do you remember it?
No.
#1 song to pick you up.
Oh my gosh, I was just listening to it before I left. It's a Nina Simone song, and it's called How It Feels to Be Free.
Oh,
it's
I don't
so
know
good.
Okay, I'll look that up for sure.
Fiercest female character on TV.
Who do I say? Olivia Pope?
Olivia Pope.
Prince William or Prince Harry?
I don't know. Harry. Harry? Sure.
Sure. What year was that?
October 2015.
October 2015?
Less than a year.
Before we met? Funny, I'm sorry. I, of course, choose you.
Okay. Wait. This just, again, shows how little you knew. They look like how far we've come.
How would you describe it, Archie?
Like it's almost beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
Archie, you having fun?
This is a great love story. And the craziest thing is that I think this love story is only just getting started. You know, she sacrificed everything that she ever knew, the freedom that she had, to join me in my world. And then pretty soon after that, I ended up sacrificing everything that I know to join her in her world.
Why did you want to make this documentary?
I'm not going to say that it's comfortable, but when you feel like people haven't gotten any sense of who you are for so long, it's really nice to just be able to have the opportunity to let people have a bit more of a glimpse into what's happened and also who we are.
A friend of ours actually suggested that we document ourselves through this period of time, with all of the misinformation that was going on out there, especially about us and the departure. It seemed like a really sensible idea.
Maybe this is the first video diary. I don't know. We've talked about it. We keep talking about it because we know that right now it might not make sense, but one day it will make sense.
So we're here Friday, the 17th of April or something.
Snow. We've been really conscious of protecting our kids as best as we can and also understanding the role that they play in this really historical family.
As a dad and as parents, I think consent is a really key piece to this. That if you have children, it should be your consent as to what you share.
Both the babies are down. Nice calm night. Just picking some roses. The past 6 years of my life, books are written about our story from people who I don't know. Doesn't it make more sense to hear our story from us?
All right, I'll go first on this one. When he's talking, he's pretty relaxed. You know, he's fairly relaxed there. His hands are steepling. That indicates that he feels like he's in charge. He's the alpha there. He understands what's happening and is moving things forward. And so he's got a lot of confidence at this point. His moves are very smooth. His illustrators are very smooth and they're on point. Nothing, his hand to his mouth, I think that's giving him, so he's kind of stopping to show you that he's thinking about what he just said or giving you room to think about the thoughts he's just shared at this point. Then she says, or at Meghan's part where the woman asks her, why did you want to make this documentary? She doesn't answer the question. She doesn't give the answer. She says, it's not comfortable. That's what she says. It's not comfortable. This is, look at me. That's why she's doing it. Why'd you want to make this documentary? So everybody look at me. I got the kid over here, the redhead. He's going to be in it too, but it's mostly about me. That would have been the correct answer, I think, to me anyway. And then she exposes her throat. She throws her head back. You see her throat and her neck. You don't do that when you're uncomfortable. She's talking about, well, it's not comfortable, but then she does the most trusting thing you can possibly do. She throws her head back and shows you her neck and her throat, totally exposed, her hands to her sides, all that. Something's not right here. That totally goes against what she's saying. She's comfortable. She loves this. She's absolutely eating it up. And then this entire platform they've got is all about how horrible the media is. That's all they talk about is how he treated them horrible. It's terrible. And that's what's making people hate him. And they're part of the problem. Actually, he says they're part of this secret they're getting ready to tell. However, they invite him into the house. They say, you know what? Let's make a documentary. You come in and follow us around. We don't like it when people do that. We're going to let you do that. And we're going to make videos of ourselves talking through our most private moments. You'll be able to see us talking and living our lives to give people an idea of what's happening with us. Well, why would you care about what people thought about you when you didn't want people to think about you? You're trying to get away from that. Then why are you doing it? $100 million from Netflix, because they say he says a friend of ours suggested that we do a documentary on this to show his friend probably said, dude, you know what you ought to do? You need to get your guy and call Netflix and see if you can get $100 million. I'll bet you they give you $100 million. And he probably said, you know what? I'm going to check that out and look into it after he talked to her. I think that's what happened. That's why they're doing this. I mean, we're seeing a lot of a lot of these fake expressions that just throw the whole sincerity thing. The whole thing seems disingenuous the way she's smiling. Those aren't Duchenne smiles. These are fake emotions she's showing us right now. And that first question, when she says, it's not comfortable, for me, that puts a stake in this monster's heart. That tells us everything. That's why they're doing it. It's for the attention, because she didn't say, I'm doing it to do, she didn't give the answer that they're supposed to be ready to give, which they've talked about and they've prepped for, they have. So she didn't give that answer. And it's all about, at this point, being relative. Who cares about them anymore? They're not part of the royal family. They think they're these rebels and these outliers who are doing this thing that's supposed to be so great, and their duty and their service. Again, what is their duty? What is their service? His duty is to protect his family. No kidding. So this whole thing seems, it's not right. It's not right here. What they're talking about, the way they're portraying this to be seen, and the reason they're doing this. Again, his illustrators are smooth. When it comes back to him, they're large. He's talking at a pretty good clip, but still, everything seems smooth. He doesn't seem stressed. We're seeing no true behaviors or indications of stress on this guy. So his cadence is normal. His blink rate is normal. We got nothing there that tells he's being stressed, but that's all she talks about. It's how horrible it is, how it's uncomfortable. And then when she goes back to her, when she's talking about this historical family, her eyebrows go up for that request for approval. That's another one that Greg has coined, the request for approval. Like, what? Really? Can I do this? Is it okay if I do that? And we're seeing that from her as she's given this information about about what she thinks about what's happening, about this historical family, that she's talking about her family. I don't think she's talking about the royal family. Maybe she is. Maybe I'm reading that wrong. But I think she's talking about those, she and Harry and their kids. Her diction is clean. It's really clear, as it would be if you were acting. Mark, I'm sure you've had to deal with people who their diction just is horrible. You've had to say, hang on a minute, man. I don't understand what you're saying. You got to overdo it. Use your whole mouth when you're talking. Don't talk like that. And she is, because she's performing at this section. And I think, again, for him, in that third section of him, it's the same as it's been up to that point, because we're just seeing different clips from that original video we saw of him talking. All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, look, it is beautifully made, though, full of contradictions that you're coming up there with, Scott, but beautifully made there. Here we are, back with that music in again, that romantic music, as he says, this is a love story. I don't think it is a love story. I'll tell you in a few videos' time what kind of story I think it actually is, and it's a little bit unfortunate, but I don't think it's the love story that, I'm not saying they're not in love, but I don't think this whole thing is the love story that he'd like it to be. We start off with this light. It might be sunrise, it might be sunset, I'm not quite sure, but the light, this world of shadows, lens flares as well that are blinding, it becomes quite opaque. They're already telling us in this documentary that we're really not going to be able to see exactly what's going on, and we're going to be blinded sometimes by what we see. Historical family comes out there, and consent is a key piece to this. For historical families, no, consent isn't a key piece at all. So there's a contradiction for a start. Because historians write the stories about historical families. If you're a historical family, you don't get to write your own story. The historians write it for you. They're there to make sense of it for a bigger world, because it's a much bigger story often than you, the individual. And so here's the contradiction. If they tell their story, it may well make sense. Well, a historical family's story never makes sense to the people in it because they never get to write it. You know, the victors of the people, the historians get to write that story. So full of contradictions, but again, just beautifully made. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, you asked one question, Scott, early that said, who cares what they do? A lot of people care what they do. This is entertainment of the kind of a train wreck. And some people like them, I assume. I don't know. But I think there's a whole lot of train wreck associated with this. And this is, I read today, the #1 Netflix show in forever. So if that gives you any idea how many people care, then yeah, we may end up doing 6 shows. Anyway,
good for you.
Having said all that, a couple of things. She starts off, the first time they talk to her, she has that concerned brow, that knitted brow that she does usually when she's talking. I think that's just how am I being perceived? That's her personality. We saw her do it. We were just talking to a young woman on some TV interview earlier. You see her brow knit and her face go up. Not the request for approval. We'll see later. Interesting. His body language says, I'm on a mission. I have something to do. Look at all those illustrators lining up with his face and all that as he's talking about when they ask why. He has a plan. He has a message. I think he does have an axe to grind. He does have something that bothers him. And we'll see what that is as we go further along. Not sure she's got the same axe to grind. I think you're right. I think, Mark, she gets the chance to be in public. It puts her back in front of. Look, if you want to go and hide, you don't marry somebody who is a screen hog. You don't marry an actor because you're going to be dragged right back into what you hate. These guys are right back in what they hate. They just have more control over it than they would have if they lived in England, is what I assume, or if they were still in the royal family. But his illustrators are good. His face shows everything's working. His eyes are down to the right when he's looking, and he's looking like he has some emotion there. I think his emotion, his anger that we're going to start to see fuel, we'll see some really good indicators, is genuine. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it is legitimate. Who knows? We don't know what happened in England. We'll hear their version of that in later stories, and then we'll find out what is really there. One of the more interesting ones for me is that when she starts talking about this diary, she does a hell of a lot of blinking when she says, I don't know if this will be useful, and eye blocking. I think this has been the plan the entire time. I think he's got a message and a plan, and she has something else. When she says historical family, their role in history, all of those things, their role they play, I think she's equating them to something bigger. And Mark, not being British, most Americans are like, okay, they're royal family. But Edward and Wallace is a very different story. When you're king and you abdicate and walk away, Charles and Diana, for that matter, very different story because next in line, and it impacted his life. Look, these guys can walk away. They give up whatever it is they gave up. But I have in my notes, poor little Richie Rich here. I feel so bad for him. You know, everybody's born into a situation. A lot of people are born into a poor family where they have no way to get out of it. This is a very different kind of thing. But he is reinforcing his message. And I'm starting to see 2 very different approaches to this. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Chase, what do you see?
Scott, I tend to agree with you that this seems like the video has a very specific purpose. But if you're wrong, or if you're slightly wrong, this seems to have all of the hallmarks of one of those people who responds to like an online troll and writes that 17-page long comment just to help the trolls understand how things are. That might be an aspect of this. And maybe there's not one singular thing, but maybe this is one of those things. They're trying to respond to the trolls. Oh, everyone has this misunderstood. Let me write this 17-page comment in here. And I'm not going to say that it's comfortable right at this moment. There's exactly what we have talked about before. There's smug eye closure display, where we talk as someone's talking like this and their eyes are closed. This is smugness. And here's how to tell when this is more of a smug display. Number 1, they just smiled or are smiling while they're talking. Number 2, the eyebrows raised briefly during or right before that. And number 3, they have little to no tension in the eyelid. They're not squinting their eyes. Their eyelids are untense, so they're relaxed. So there aren't any studies on this, but also there aren't any studies that prove Gordon Ramsay's recipes are pretty good. And this is as much an art form as that. And I think experience matters more than studies in many of these cases. So she immediately distances herself with this shift, with the famous pronoun shift, when she says, when you feel like people haven't gotten any sense of who you are. This is a pronoun shift. She's shifting the blame. And keep in mind, we're 2 videos in here. Not one piece of substantive information has been introduced. 0. And I challenge you to find one in the upcoming videos. Maybe there is one. But you'll notice that they start talking with uptalk, which is an upward tone. When she's saying understanding the role they play in this historic family. And then Harry says consent is really a key piece to this. I have no idea where these are going. So that's all I've got for this one here.
Well, you know what? I'm going to see who leans the best. I'm going to give them the award. Lost my spot. I'm going to have to give it to Chase.
Look at that. How would you describe it, Archie?
Like it's almost beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
Archie, you having fun?
This is a great love story. And the craziest thing is that I think this love story is only just getting started. You know, she sacrificed everything that she ever knew, the freedom that she had, to join me in my world. And then pretty soon after that, I ended up sacrificing everything that I know to join her in her world.
Why did you want to make this documentary?
I'm not going to say that it's comfortable, but when you feel like people haven't gotten any sense of who you are for so long, it's really nice to just be able to have the opportunity to let people have a bit more of a glimpse into what's happened and also who we are.
A friend of ours actually suggested that we document ourselves through this period of time, with all of the misinformation that was going on out there, especially about us and the departure. It seemed like a really sensible idea.
Maybe this is the first video diary? I don't know. We've talked about it. We keep talking about it because we know that right now it might not make sense, but one day it will make sense.
So we're here Friday the, whatever it is, 17th of April or something.
Snow!
We've been really conscious of protecting our kids as best as we can and also understanding the role that they play in this really historical family.
As a dad and as parents, I think consent is a really key piece to this. That if you have children, it should be your consent as to what you share.
Both the babies are down. Nice calm night. Just picking some roses. The past 6 years of my life, books are written about our story from people who I don't know. Doesn't it make more sense to hear our story from us?
I think for so many people in the family, especially obviously the men, there can be a temptation or an urge to marry someone who would fit the mold, as opposed to somebody who you perhaps are destined to be with. The difference between making decisions with your head or your heart. And my mum certainly made most of her decisions, if not all of them, from her heart. Do I remember a moment when I suddenly realized that my family was different? No, I just think it's gradual. There's no point that we're all sat down in a classroom and my grandmother stands there with, the long stick and a glass, and then everyone else goes, right, so this is what it means to be in the royal family.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
This is a classic example of distancing language, and it's actually very well done. In this documentary about themselves, we're still hearing vague, hollow references to situations and to people that are like clouded in mystery. He's not talking about himself. He's not discussing how he felt or how that he felt this temptation or urge at all. He's suggesting that might be the case, but the language is so removed and filled with upward tones and vague language that it's bordering on lacking meaning. And when he's saying, I think it's just gradual, there's no discussion of anything of substance again, only speaking to what isn't there and doesn't happen. So again, empty, hollow, vague, dare I say, a 3-syllable word here on the behavior panel, platitudes are what we are filled with here. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're seeing the beginning of a story he's going to try to tell us through this whole thing. And the beginning of that story is around what happened to his mother, the biggest event in his life. And I think, guys, there may be some arrested development. I'm not a psychologist, but there may be some arrested development. Here's the reason you're seeing him behave that way. Not confrontational, not likely to go and be aggressive, because there's a smile of recognition that his mother was not necessarily the swiftest, that she did some stupid things and followed her heart, didn't follow her brain. And you can see that smile of recognition. And you see him blinking. I don't think that blink is stress. I think it's his processor working, as you would say, Chase. That's processor speed. And he's sitting there trying to think of what to say next. Then when you get in that second part, there's some pretty powerful body language there. You see that contempt in his face when he talks about his family, that intake breath, and then those exposed lower teeth and that jaw jut. That's pretty powerful body language about family. I think we're probably going to see more of this, but he's got a message that he wants to deliver, whether it's a powerful message, whether it's done well or not, whether he's confrontational or not. Some of that, Chase, I'm going to assume is his very British upbringing. Some of it is very royal upbringing and told you do whatever you feel, however you want, don't show it, would be my guess that some of it's there. But there's a lot of body language when he does that contempt, when he's talking about my family, when I found out my family was not normal. And then his lower teeth exposed and working that jaw all indicate to me that he's showing anger back to the family. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. So let me tell you what story I think this is. I think he feels it's a love story, a love narrative. I think it's actually a little bit of a tragedy. And so just to not put a psychology hat on, just leave it on the hat rack over there, but allude to it slightly. We tend to repeat things that are unresolved. What he says is that that there's a tendency within the family to marry people who fit, but he alludes to his mother being somebody who didn't quite fit, and that's the tragedy of her. She didn't quite fit. Okay, so now he's alluding to he's going to break the mold by being with the partner that he's in right now. And yet he talks about the similarities between the two of them. And therefore the tragedy for me seems to be that he is in a pattern here where he is always, and this will sound extraordinarily Freudian, but he's always going to marry his mother, because he has to save his mother. He didn't save his mother when he was a child, and he will place himself in the opportunity of saving his mother from the same kind of pain that eventually he would suggest, ran her to her death. It is, as he says, history repeating itself, but not quite in the way that he thinks it's repeating itself. History doesn't repeat itself. It rhymes. And the rhyme here is that he is destined, we would say in that tragic sense, he is destined to have a relationship with somebody and put them or both of them get into a situation where she will need saving and he'll finally be able to save his mother. If that's a possibility, he could turn a tragedy into what we call a comedy, something that ends really well. Hope it all ends well for them. But at the moment, it seems quite tragic. He has this fatal flaw of needing to save his mother. Scott, what do you got on this one?
All right. His illustrators are strong and on point. He still seems very relaxed as he's going through this. We see that eye flutter. I see what you're saying, Greg, about when he's talking about the people in the family, the men. But I think that gets on his nerves because he's supposed to be part of that, but he's not anymore. So maybe maybe there's something at play in that as well. But he's very comfortable talking to the camera. He loves that. Because like I said before, since he was a little kid, they've told him exactly what to do and how to do it. It's the perfect upbringing. In a royal families, you're literally trained to talk to the camera, how to sit, how to stand, how to talk, where to put your hands, all those things. They teach you all that. So that's why he's so comfortable doing that. And he has eye closure when he talks about his mom, and I think he's doing that because he's proud of her. I think he's proud of what she did. And then he says, I remember when I realized my family was different. And we see that really hard chin jut and then a micro expression of anger. So I think maybe that bothers him. Maybe it really does bother him. There's a part of that, or maybe he's mad at his family for, they're not shunning him. He started it. So they're just, I think at this point, when you're out, you're out. So I think that's what's happened. I think he's mad at him because they're treating him that way. He doesn't have all the freedoms he used to have. So he moved. He left the country. And while his head is back, again, he does that gratuitous pause, which is like a gift to us. So we can see him experience this emotion. Give us enough time to let that read and see him going through it and like, oh, wow, yeah, he's feeling emotion. Then his arms do that roll out forward. That's the most active and largest illustrator we've seen from him so far. And as he talks, he exhales almost with relief as he finishes that last little sentence in his paragraph. That's like so he's expressing his emotions as he's saying it, as he's letting that air out as he relaxes or blows off steam from that. All right, that's all I got. We good?
Just one more point on that, Scott, because he does say in that video that his mother, there weren't any lectures on how to be. They weren't taught. She says they weren't taught. But the question is how does anybody in a family get taught how to be in a family? There are no lectures. My dad and mum didn't give me a lecture. My aunts and
right there, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, you do this, do that. No, that's not how culture works. So you can't have it both ways. You can't have it, our family I don't want to be special, but our family didn't have lectures for how to be in the family. No family has lectures.
So you don't think they taught him? You don't think they
it's like any culture. It's picked up as an undercurrent. You're there.
I bet there's a PowerPoint somewhere.
A manual.
I think there's
Don't be a brat. Sit.
Yeah.
I think for so many people in the family, especially obviously the men, there can be a temptation or an urge to marry someone who would fit the mold, as opposed to somebody who you perhaps are destined to be with. The difference between making decisions with your head or your heart. And my mum certainly made most of her decisions, if not all of them, from her heart. Do I remember a moment when I suddenly realized that my family was different? No, I just think it's gradual. There's no point that we're all sat down in a classroom and my grandmother stands there with, the long stick and a glass and then everyone else goes, right, so this is what it means to be in the royal family. My childhood, I remember, was filled with laughter, filled with happiness and filled with adventure.
In their imaginations, the children were already off to a fire.
I don't have many early memories of my mum. It was almost like internally I sort of blocked them out. But I always remember her laugh, her cheeky laugh. Her always saying to me, like, you can get in trouble, just don't get caught. And I'll always be that cheeky person inside.
The young prince made a pair of cardboard binoculars, determined to beat the press at their own game.
The majority of my memories are of being swarmed by paparazzi.
Like many British families, the Waleses like to head for the Spanish sun every August. Their holiday nightmare is the world's press. An army of royal watchers are drawn each year.
Rarely do we have a holiday without someone with a camera, jumping out of a bush or something. Within the family, within the system, the advice that's always given is don't react. Don't feed into it. There was always public pressure with its fair share of drama, stress, and also tears, and witnessing those tears. I could always see it on my mum's face. And I guess those are the moments when I thought, okay, hang on a second, maybe what am I? Who am I? What am I part of?
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, not a lot here. He talks about not having many memories of his mother when he was young. That he's blotted something out because, look, you would think he would have memories. There's plenty of pictures showing him there. Then a lot of these around a little kid are really cool to see. When he walks out front and you see he does that chin back, his chin's withdrawn, his brow is down. He looks a little confused and then he waves. So I wonder when you're a little kid and you see all the paparazzi, do you think that they're the entertainment, not you? Because if I were sitting there, I'd be like, whoa, look at this. This is like going to Lion Country Safari or some safari place where I'm looking at wild animals. And he just has that weird look. The other one I would say is I feel his pain as a ginger standing in the sun, rubbing his eyes because he can't take it. We all have that. The last part here, and this is a piece that really matters, is when he squints and does that air intake and that kind of pulls his cheeks back a little in that kind of eek move at, wait a minute, who am I? And then he starts to show disgust and disdain when he's talking about the institution and the paparazzi. This is more the same message. And if I were looking for a method to try to attack or to go after the royal family, this is probably what I would do if I were him. Look, they are in cahoots with these guys. He even said those words earlier. There's bribery and that. It looks like he's trying to deliver a message that's bigger than I'm leaving. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, right at the beginning, he stops himself from using the word remember. And he goes back in his own speech and edits his speech to change it to was. Now, I remember my childhood, and then he says, my childhood was, and he remembers it at first and deletes that from the record there. And then immediately after that, there's a spike in word repetition with filled with laughter, filled with happiness, filled with adventure. And this tongue jut is so perfect when he sticks his tongue right out of his mouth. It's so perfectly placed here when he's telling us about his mom saying, don't get caught. Tongue juts, exactly like this one, are most commonly seen when someone has done something mischievous or when somebody gets away with something. Look for them in your life, most often at a negotiation on price or something like that, to see if you're getting ripped off. So when he says the word a majority of my life, this means more than half. And this lends to a childhood 100% not filled with laughter, happiness, and adventure, like we heard. And he's saying there's public pressure with its fair share of drama, stress, and also tears. Now we've 100% departed from laughter, happiness, and adventure. Absolutely. And this one clip here gives the story of two different human beings. If you were to examine which is more important for him to discuss, step one would be observing which topics are more prevalent. So 90% of this video is about the negative aspects of life. With an editing, he's changing his own words to remove the word remember from discussing anything positive. He takes the word remember all the way out of the discussion and forces the discussion into something negative on purpose, I think as a conscious decision. Mark?
Yeah, so let me take that idea and run even further with it, Chase. Yes, he does go to tears, and then he says, and witnessing those tears, always see it on my mum's face. So this is a boy who would see tears and would be the witness of those tears and always see those on his mum's face. Not occasionally, not now and again, always on his mum's face. He then says, who am I? I am what I am. Well, he's the child that always sees tears on his mother's face. And so as people interested in behavior, people interested in body language, we're looking for patterns and we're looking for deviations from those patterns. And here we see a strong pattern so I want you to look out as we take you through this bigger documentary over time. If you're interested, subscribe, let us know you want to see more of this and we'll go all the way through it for you. But here's what you want to look out for is what happens to him when he sees tears on his wife's face, because he must see tears on her face for that to break the mold of royalty and for this to be his mother. And for him to be his mother's son, he must witness tears on his wife's face. I want you to look out in the documentary over time as to what happens when he sees those tears. That's all I got on that one. Scott, what do you got?
All right. He's really, really comfortable. This is the same as he was before in the other videos because it's from the same interview. So it's the same as the rest of the shots. And the only thing that I'll be different with you on about the tongue chase is when a lot of times you don't agree with something, you'll see a tongue jut. A lot of times if you don't agree with what you've seen or you don't want to do whatever it is, you may do that. Or you're getting like Greg always goes to the part where you stick it out because you're getting rid of something. You're trying to get to push something off, push something away. With the thing where you feel like you're getting away with something, the tongue comes through the teeth. It's like that. And I don't remember that because there was a lunch lady when I was a kid, and every time she'd give me too much macaroni and cheese because she knows I like that, she would always do that. And she was getting away with something because they were never supposed to do that. But I always talked to her and told her how much I like that. So that's the reason I remember that part the most on that. But that's all I've got for all that. Okay, we good?
Great macaroni and cheese story.
Oh, yeah.
My childhood, I remember, was filled with laughter, filled with happiness, and filled with adventure.
In their imaginations, the children were already off to a fire.
I don't have many early memories of my mum. It was almost like internally I sort of blocked them out. But I always remember her laugh, her cheeky laugh. Her always saying to me, like, you can get in trouble, just don't get caught. And I'll always be that cheeky person inside.
The young prince made a pair of cardboard binoculars, determined to beat the press at their own game.
The majority of my memories are of being swarmed by paparazzi.
Like many British families, the Waleses like to head for the Spanish sun every August. Their holiday nightmare is the world's press. An army of royal watchers are drawn each year.
Rarely did we have a holiday without someone with a camera, jumping out of a bush or something. Within the family, within the system, the advice that's always given is don't react. Don't feed into it. There was always public pressure with its fair share of drama, stress, and also tears, and witnessing those tears. I could always see it on my mum's face. And I guess those are the moments when I thought, okay, hang on a second, maybe what am I? Who am I? What am I part of?
As a parent, I want to protect children. Thank you.
I think she had a lived experience of how she was struggling living that life. She felt compelled to talk about it.
Tonight on Panorama, the Princess of Wales.
Especially in that Panorama interview. I think we all now know that she was deceived into giving the interview, but at the same time, she spoke the truth of her experience.
How do you feel about the way the press behaves towards you now?
I still to this day find the interest daunting and phenomenal, because I actually don't like being the centre of attention. When I have my public duties, I understand that when I get out of the car, I'm being photographed. But actually, it's now when I go out of my door, my front door, I'm being photographed. I never know where a lens is going to be.
My mum was harassed throughout her life with my dad. But after they separated, the harassment went to new levels.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
All right, I'll go first on this one. This is what true sincerity looks like. This is what Meghan's trying to be and trying to portray or trying to pull off, and it's not working, because this is what it really looks like. If you ever wondered, this is what you're looking for. She takes a deep breath before she answers, and you can tell she's thinking about her answer. These aren't prepared answers. They may be, the idea, the concepts may be ready, but not like when Meghan's looks like she's acting in hers. These are true expressions that we're seeing, especially around the worry and the concern, expressions of concern and worry when she starts talking about the photographers being outside the house, the paparazzi being outside the house. And then again, she pauses and she's thinking a little bit more. Her cadence is slow. Her vocal tone is strong, her volume is strong, and her diction is great. It's really clear, but it's heartfelt. You can tell it's heartfelt coming out of there. The sound of it is a much rounder, more sincere tone. The confirmation nods on, I understand. She's letting you know she gets it. She understands what's happening here. She knows that comes as part of it. She gets that. Then those multiple right shoulder shrugs, that's just her not being sure again about those people being outside the door when she opens the door and when she opens the car door. Her blink rate only spikes on public duties. That's the only time I'm seeing it go almost a flutter. And that lets us know that when it comes to doing what she's supposed to be doing, that's stressful for her, because she's pulled from obscurity. She wasn't pulled from a TV show. She's not an actress. She was just, like normal people in Britain. That's why they loved her so much, because she was one of them and she got in, so that's is she not? No, tell me, Mark, what is it?
Aristocracy. One of the richest families in the country over the...
Oh, you're kidding me. I always thought she was like some poor person that they brought in. No. Oh, man. Okay, well, I bought totally into that.
Red for the job.
Okay, didn't know that. Okay, that changes my story then. Yeah. All right, let's talk about this. No. So but that's what it really looks like. That's what the sincerity really looks like, which is in there. That head tilt to the left, when she talks about it being daunting, I think that shows that the innocence of it, like she's really, that really bothers her. That really bothers her. And then she has that eye squint because she's getting serious and she's focusing in on that part she's talking about right there. And then, and she's not looking for pity. She's not looking for empathy, nothing like that. None of this stuff is circling back to her as in, I'm having the worst time. This is terrible. There's a secret. There's all this stuff. Never touches that on any of that. Never brings any of that up. There's none of that fake smiling like Meghan's doing. No poor, pitiful me. None of that. I think this is what Harry thinks he wants Meghan to be, is what we're seeing here. He wants his wife to be what his mother was. You know, I mean, talk about an Oedipal complex. I think he wants to sleep with Oedipus. I mean, it's what it looks like. It's going that deep, I think, at this point. So he wants his wife to be his mother. Like you said earlier, Mark, it's weird. It's odd. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I think he would be Oedipus in this scenario. And it seems here that Harry is describing himself when he's describing his mother. He's saying there's a lived experience, struggling, living that life, compelled to talk about it. She spoke the truth of her experience. People harassed her throughout her life. The harassment went to new levels. He's removed every possible positive element of his mother's life and is now forcing the lens of focus on negative and specifically precise aspects of her life that mirror his own. He's forcing the lens to look at aspects of his mother's life that mirror his own. And he's providing us reassurance for his present decisions. He's saying, this is what she did, and I'm doing this. So he's using that, I think, to provide us some kind of reassurance for his present decisions. That's all I got. Greg?
Yeah, a couple things. Yes, I agree. He doesn't talk much about his mother in the positive, but I also will tell you one of the most profound things in your life is when your mother passes, because it's a different part of your life than you think it's going to be. And this is a kid. This is a 12-year-old kid. The single most important moment in his life, probably. Now, there could have been many others since then, but up to then, you would almost say, well, that's it. So probably that leaves behind a negative emotion associated. I'm just going to go that way and say that happens. When he's talking about his mother, it's interesting because if you watch him, he's contemplating and he's thinking through his answer. He actually touches his chin. He's illustrating what he's thinking. He's pretty clear. He lilts up at she felt compelled to talk about it. And then you see a request for approval in his brow. And I think it's because that's him conjecturing what she thought. And he's just asking to connect with you on it. Then the interesting piece is he said she was deceived. And you see his narrowing of his eyes when he's talking about the interview. By the way, guys, we get requests for that one all the time. Maybe that's one we ought to do sometime, but it's old. The footage is old, but people love it. His eyes narrow, and we think that's disapproval. But the harassment went to new levels. Here's an interesting one. We talk to you all the time about people looking down to the right for emotion. And then what's happening in his case is his head is hanging down to the right. When people get to an emotional state, often you'll see that. Their head is hanging down to the right. But his eyes are down left as he's thinking about how to word this. So interesting because we see that fairly often in pre-confession as well. Person's head will be hanging and they'll be going to internal voice. So you can tell this is feeling for him. Don't know exactly what he's feeling. Not important, but I do know there's feeling associated. With her, there's internal voice at when she starts talking about interest and then daunting as she moves into that. You hear internal voice. Her brow goes to concern. You see that knitting of the brow and her eyes. Scott, you hit it dead on. Her eyes narrow first and then wide and big, almost like fear when she says, I don't know where they're going to be next. There's contempt in the left side of her face when she says, I'm going to go out when I go out my door. And then she does that trademark for her, look under her brow and pull taffy to draw the person in to make a connection. I think part of the reason, when we think about her as a person, it's that appeal to others and that trying to connect and listening that probably did more good than anything else that we don't see the same way in these two. He's sending this message. And to me, it looks like a genuine message of frustration with where things went. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so deceived. And I think we do, Greg, get that narrowing of the eyes. We get top lip tightening as well. I think it's anger, and anger's an offensive move. I mean, it's there to show people off the territory, move them away. Once again, protective of his mother, just like he's saying he is protective of his family. I think for him, they're potentially very much the same thing. If you protect your family, you're protecting your mother at the same time. Daunting and phenomenal. And yes, there was nothing more phenomenal than Diana, an absolute phenomenon that the world hadn't ever seen before. She says public duties, and then there's the differentiation between that and out of my front door. And you're right, Greg, contempt. She's trying to make a very big differentiation as to where she is, what is her public persona and what is her private life as well. And she feels if she leaves a certain door, that's private. And if she comes out a different door, that's public. She's saying one is fair game, the other isn't fair game. Later on in this documentary, Harry will differentiate as to what he feels is fair game that you're born into or you maybe marry into, and what he thinks is absolutely unfair, and that's why it's a bigger documentary, because the documentary makers have wanted here to make a documentary not only about them, but about Britain in general, the idea of Britain and the institution of Britain, and the idea of institutional racism that of course Britain and the newspapers have a history of racism. Of course we do. Of course we do. You know, who would think anything else? Well, some might, some may not. But that's really the differentiator that he's going to make later on. She's making this differentiator of one is fair game, but my private life isn't. My kids aren't. Interesting. Let's see where this goes.
As a parent, I want to protect children. Thank you.
I think she had a lived experience of how she was struggling living that life. She felt compelled to talk about it.
Tonight on Panorama, the Princess of Wales.
Especially in that Panorama interview. I think we all now know that she was deceived into giving the interview, but at the same time, she spoke the truth of her experience.
How do you feel about the way the press behaves towards you now?
I still to this day find the interest daunting and phenomenal, because I actually don't like being the centre of attention. When I have my public duties, I understand when I get out of the car, I'm being photographed. But actually, it's now when I go out of my door, my front door, I'm being photographed. I never know where a lens is going to be.
My mum was harassed throughout her life with my dad, but after they separated, the harassment went to new levels.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
The moment that she divorced and the moment she left the institution, then she was by herself. Yes, she may well have been one of the most influential and powerful women in the world, but she was completely exposed to this. I saw things, I experienced things, I learned things. The pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution. I remember thinking, how can I ever find someone who is willing and capable to be able to withstand all the baggage that comes with being with me? Every relationship that I had, within a matter of weeks or months, was splattered all over the newspapers, and that person's family harassed and their lives turned upside down. So, you know, I mean, after one or two girlfriends, the third or fourth girlfriend, you're gonna be like, hang on a second. I don't know if I want this. So when I got to meet Em, I was terrified of her being driven away by the media. The same media that had driven so many other people away from me. I knew that the only way that this could possibly work is by keeping it quiet for as long as possible.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
Not a whole lot here. When he said she left, was by herself, the pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution, there's a whole lot of insinuation, going on. Zero information, actually. Zero. And we see the first genuine expression of contempt here when he's talking about the press. But the only genuine expression is when the press is driving people away from him, specifically away from him and his life. Not about his mom, but about him and his life. So it's devoid of actual information. It's a lot of vague ideas, vague platitudes, and it's mostly hollow. So it's a lot of talking, some great, wonderful piano, and that's about it. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, beautiful Michael Nyman-esque piano again. Fantastic. Love that stuff. Nice roundup gesture that he does there. Nice and big. The idea of the baggage that comes with me and wanting somebody who can withstand the pain and the suffering that comes with being a woman in this institution. Again, I don't want to hammer this too hard, but I've got nothing else to do this evening. So I will. Terrified of her being driven away by the media. So it's terrifying when your mother dies, and the mother was driven away by the media. Literally, the media were behind her, the paparazzi were behind her, and she was driven away to her death.
Easy.
I don't want to hammer this one of the rhyme of history too much, but there it is in a what some people might call a Freudian slip there, as to not terrified that his mother will be driven away again. That's all I got on that one. Again, because I have nothing better to do this evening. Scott, what do you got?
Okay. Okay. I was going to say, maybe it's the drugs from your tooth.
Right. No, they didn't give me
Advil.
They didn't give me any of those. Unfortunately, none of those truth serums.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway,
the dentists keep those very well locked away these days.
All right. Not in America. Yeah. Anyway, I'm hearing a little bit of uptick where it's turning a little bit more towards him. A lot of I, a lot of me, a lot of things like you guys were saying, a little bit more toward him. And he leans forward on the completely to sort of drive that home. And then he's still relaxed. His cadence is normal. His illustrators are still big and on point. No stress cues to speak of. And he sounds like he wants to marry somebody just like his mom, which I think he's attempting to do. But you compare the two, Meghan's getting nowhere near the Diana level. Am I going too hard on that whole thing there?
Yet.
Okay.
She's not there yet.
Okay, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so there are a couple of interesting things. He talks about pain and suffering of women marrying into the institution. So I guess you needed one. You decided to go outside of the institution, which, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not like there are 9 women in England who fit that institution. There are many, 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 many aristocrats there who would fit that organization. So he had to go outside and find him one just so he could watch the pain and suffering, I suppose. I don't know. Maybe, Mark, he is trying to repeat something. That's an awkward choice of words when you are the person who wanted to date outside of that circle. So kind of an interesting one. The best part of the whole thing for me is his message is fluid and unhalting, as if he didn't notice it. Chase, I think you are right dead on. It's not a lot. He doesn't use a lot of facts. I think he alludes to that when he says he's more like his mother. And he said earlier, she thought with her heart, sometimes not with her head. I think he is more feelings and music than he is thought. And we're not getting a lot of thoughts, a lot of facts. When they do those selfies, there's no Duchenne smile in there. I don't know what that's about, but it is what it is. And then that contempt or disdain is pronounced when he talks about them taking people away from him. It's all about his feelings. This is going to show us what his whole message is going through here. That's all I got.
All right.
And Scott, he's going to show up on your Hallmark channel with all that music and themes.
Yeah, I hope so.
The moment that she divorced and the moment she left the institution, then she was by herself. Yes, she may well have been one of the most influential and powerful women in the world, but she was completely exposed to this. I saw things, I experienced things, I learned things. The pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution. I remember thinking, how can I ever find someone who is willing and capable to be able to withstand all the baggage that comes with being with me? Every relationship that I had, within a matter of weeks or months, was splattered all over the newspapers, and that person's family harassed and their lives turned upside down. So, you know, I mean, after one or two girlfriends, the third or fourth girlfriend, you're gonna be like, hang on a second. I don't know if I want this. So when I got to meet Em, I was terrified of her being driven away by the media. The same media that had driven so many other people away from me. Two hats to wear. One was two grieving sons wanting to cry, grieve, and process that grief because of losing our mum. And two was the royal hat, show no emotion, get out there, meet the people, shake the hands.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
William.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, God, I'm gonna cry.
The UK literally swept me and William up as their children. An expectation to see myself and William out and about. It was really hard for the two of us.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so royalty in the UK sense are symbolic. They're actual people, but they're also symbolic of something. And this goes way, way back in history, actually back to times when royalty were actually sacrificial as well. They would have to go through tests that were emblematic of the tests that we all go through. So here he talks about these two hats. There's one hat, which is him, the grieving son. That's Harry, the person. Okay. And there's another one that has to go out there and shake hands and be the avatar for other people's grief. He has to show nothing and others must cry around him. He becomes the symbol of the grieving son, not the grieving son. He becomes the symbol of the grieving person who has lost somebody too early. All of us probably at some point have experienced others in our family feeling like they've lost somebody, a friend, a family member, too early. They went too quick. It's a tragedy. And one of the things that royalty is there to do, other stars are there to do it as well, but royalty is especially important for it, is to have a national theatre, something that we can live these elements of life to come through and experience them, even if we're not going to experience them ourselves. We get that experience of what it's like to lose somebody early. So I totally get what he's talking about there is he got a very important symbolic role and a real human one as well. And it's difficult to work out those two things. Yeah, that would be a tough one to deal with, to work out what it is. What is your job? Why are you here? Why did you get lumbered with this piece? It is quite bizarre. He does say the UK literally swept us up like their children. Well, yeah, because you are their children. That's your job, is to be the nation's children. I know you didn't sign a contract on that one, but that's your job. And I think now the job that they're looking for is to be the divorced family. I mean, divorced from the family. So we can experience that. What's it like to leave your family? What's it like to leave that institution? What's that tear going to be like? It's going to be pretty painful. We get to live that now through them. I think that's their possible symbolic role, even though they maybe don't know it at this point. Or maybe they do. Maybe they're smarter than that. Chase, what you got on this one?
Yeah, when he says literally swept them up, that's not how you use the word literally. Start with that. They did not get swept up by a broom or anything. Didn't happen there. But Greg says this all the time in a different way than I do. And it's the organism does what makes the organism successful. So I want, from a behavioral perspective and not from a body language perspective, a behavioral perspective here, we're seeing the message of when I was a child, being in a position of suffering brings assistance and adoption by many. So if that made an organism successful, what would they do as a grown-up? Maybe we would see them make a suffering documentary about themselves. So as much judgment as we're casting here, everyone watching this is as guilty as I am, as Harry is. We are doing what made us successful when we were younger. And I think that's what this entire documentary is. The suffering, or being in a state of suffering, brought about adoption and brought assistance from thousands and thousands of people. And you can see it right here. The entire video, even this one clip, is completely focused on the personal aspects of royal life and the pressure to grieve and all of the stuff that's going on here. Scott, what do you got?
I agree with you. It's not literally, it'd be figuratively. You nailed that one before I got to it. Anyway, he's still very relaxed. His vocal tone is softened, though. He's getting a little bit more serious here, as you would expect at this situation. His cadence slows down a little bit, and he's sort of leaning into this from an emotional standpoint. There are no visible signs of grief on his face, although he's talking about things that should the brain should engineer grief for this, but it doesn't seem to be doing that. His illustrators have slowed down a little bit. They're not as big. But this is important to him. That's why he's so focused on it. And I think it's because this is who he sees himself as. Like Mark was saying, this is him. He's talking about, in other words, he's talking about himself. I think you nailed it, Mark. I don't think I could go much further than that. But he's the child whose mother died. That's who he is. And that's how much further can you go when that's what he's trying to be. And you juxtapose that from, the how they used to love him, how they figuratively swept him up, he and his brother up, and loved him so much, and now juxtaposed against how that same media and everything hates him now. You've got this really weird movie situation going on, but there's not really any of that happening. And to me, it looks like it's all up here where most of that's originating. But that's all I got. I think we're down to who he thinks he is. So, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, they didn't just lose his mother. He lost Diana, which is a big deal. I mean, look, everybody loses their mother, and not everybody loses Diana, I think, is part of it. And that public grieving. And trust me, when I say that, I'm not taking anything away from people losing their mother. But when you're him and your mother was this iconic thing, if you see him talk about his mother's face is a light, and then it goes away. But he starts where he's illustrating what he's thinking, and you can't miss. Mark, I love we had this hat and this hat. And you're dead on. He's now going to talk about, we were kind of royals, but now we are ex-royals. So I think we're getting back to that equation now. And I think everything you're saying here is dead on, is separating those. And Chase, the organism, it's funny. That's my thing. I was drawing a box around when you were saying that, because I have exactly the same thing in here. The organism does what made the organism successful. Often when I say successful, I don't mean necessarily healthy. It can be all kinds of successful. If I've gotten what I need and it released dopamine, and in a more horrific time like this, then it's more possible I'm going to do it. If you really want some good body language, really sad to see, look at him. Well, first of all, when he starts to talk about grief, watch his brow tips rise in the center. That's sorrow. And that looks real. He's really telling you what he thinks. But at 13 seconds, one of the best photos I've ever seen of internal voice and process shows up. This little kid, this 12-year-old, is standing there with his eyes down to the left and his tongue out of his mouth as he's trying to process what this means. That tells you it left him in a place. That's a kid going through that. And I think all of that coming out of it, where he says literally means figuratively, people embracing him became kind of what he needed. And, then when they turn their back on him, it's a hell of a lot harder than it was before. So when he starts to get in trouble in this next video, the self-pity just starts to pile up. That's all I got.
2 hats to wear. One was 2 grieving sons wanting to cry, grieve, and process that grief because of losing our mum. And 2 was the royal hat, show no emotion, get out there, meet the people, shake the hands.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
William.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, God, I'm gonna cry forever.
The UK literally swept me and William up as their children. An expectation to see myself and William out and about. It was really hard for the 2 of us. And that's when all of the stuff that had happened to our mum started happening to us.
Since Prince Harry has been at Eton, his father has tried to ensure he can have as normal a life as possible. But this latest story about Prince Harry is the 3rd time the 14-year-old has made headlines in the Mirror since he started at Eton.
Not every story was false, but there was a lot of typical exaggeration and rehashing. He's bouncing between the walls, he's taking drugs, he's drinking, he's out late, he's nightclubbing, he's got a girlfriend here, he's got a girlfriend there. What's going on? There's a difference between having to accept, okay, we have this position in this family, and therefore there's going to be a level of interest, and being swarmed by paparazzi and chasing you in cars through red lights, and then chasing you down the road on foot, which is what happened probably about 30 or 40 times when I was younger. It was too much.
Prince Harry got into a scuffle with photographers after he left a nightclub early this morning.
Within hours of the scuffle, it was headlining the tabloids. Harry lashed out, yelling, "Why don't you just leave me alone?"
Everything that was happening in the UK was so intense. I was trying to balance the whole experience of being a young boy who was trying to deal with the loss of his mum without much support or help or guidance. It didn't seem right. It didn't seem fair.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
He says all the stuff, not all false. More words, no information. This is looking to be potentially the entire show. And there's not one piece of real substantive information here that I was able to see. And when he says support, help, and guidance, I think when you have a platform like this and you're literally making a documentary about yourself, this might be what you should be offering to other people using this platform. Some of those things, instead of bringing everybody down. All right, that's all I got. Greg?
Yeah, interesting to me. There's more congruent messaging when he's talking, even though he has no real content, to your point. The most excited he gets is when he's reading the headlines. And then I was off the wall and I was doing this and I was doing that. He's actually appears to be kind of excited when he's saying that. And then he goes into this whole thing where he gets into the inevitable failure. And he starts then talking about, he does show some anger at, they set things, they started chasing me. And even when I tried to walk away. And as I watch him, the whole thing I get here is there is genuine emotion. There is something he's upset about. Remember, there's a difference between genuine emotion, meaning it actually happened, or I feel it that way. Here's why I'm angry, and legitimate anger because Chase did something to me. I draw a line between those two. If I feel like Chase did something to me, I can be just as angry, just as emotional as if he had done nothing to me. So anyway, and then he goes into this whole thing. He's starting down this path now, and he gets into born into a trap. He was mistreated. He couldn't marry for love. He did, and now he's trying to fix it. So, Scott, you say all the time, a man has to be the hero of his own story. More importantly to me, I say the most damaging thing, and I've watched this in the military, Chase, you too, guys who don't make it through courses, through the hardest courses in the military, it's self-pity. They get to a point, oh, pitiful me, and they fall apart. That's the most dangerous thing possible. And if all you operate off of your feelings and you get to that point, you're going to make some brash decisions. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so to your point there, Chase, in that first statement he makes, basically he's saying some stories were true with rehashing and exaggeration. But he's super unspecific. He says at the end of it, as he places things around, he says, what's going on? Well, we don't know what's going on. Like, tell us what's going on. That's the bit you were waiting for, Chase. Tell us. Come on. Tell us what's going on. Just
no
tell
facts.
Us. Yeah, like give us some actual information, and then we can make some decent decisions based on that. Well, look, I mean, he does give away in the cracking of his voice, the tonality of his voice. It was too much. We hear some real emotional break in there, and I believe we hear the same breaks on right and fair. And not to put too much of a spoiler on this, but if you like and subscribe and you tell us, look, we want you to do the rest of this. This theme of what is right and fair comes up in subsequent episodes, although what he does is to find a different theme to put this idea of right and fair onto. Again, he feels that his mother was unjustly, unfairly, unrighteously hounded, driven to death, essentially, and that wasn't right or fair. And he's now looking for other things not to be right and fair, so he can create righteousness and fairness around that. I think you put your finger on it there, Chase, around Greg's idea of the organism does. I think this is another, it's a pattern that he's in, and it's not so much of, it has elements of love story, but for me it has more elements of tragedy. Scott, what do you got on this one?
His cadence is speeding up a little bit. But he seems relaxed. I think you're right. I think we're seeing the emotional component come out here even a little bit more. His cadence is as fast as it's been. It's faster than it's been up to this point, up to this section. I think he's going over the most exciting part of his life so far, which was his past, up to now. Because now it's getting all these things where he feels self-important because they're doing this documentary and people hate him and all that. But I think before that, he's leading up to he's talking about his the big days like we all do. We talk about when we were in college and the last part of high school, going through college, all the wild stuff we did. He's not saying anything about himself that most of us didn't do or weren't a part of in college or coming out of college in high school. So it's just, that's what it sounds like to me, is he's just sort of reliving that stuff and saying, oh, that was exciting. His vocal tone, again, then softens in some places as he tries to hold back that emotion. So he's not being as emotional or trying to be as emotional.
And that's when all of the stuff that had happened to our mum started happening to us.
Since Prince Harry has been at Eton, his father has tried to ensure he can have as normal a life as possible. But this latest story about Prince Harry is the third time the 14-year-old has made headlines in the Mirror since he started at Eton.
Not every story was false, but there was a lot of typical exaggeration and rehashing. He's bouncing between the walls, he's taking drugs, he's drinking, he's out late, he's nightclubbing, he's got a girlfriend here, he's got a girlfriend there. What's going on? You know, there's a difference between having to accept, okay, we have this position in this family, and therefore there's going to be a level of interest, and being swarmed by paparazzi and chasing you in cars through red lights, and then chasing you down the road on foot, which is what happened probably about 30 or 40 times when I was younger. It was too much.
Prince Harry got into a scuffle with photographers after he left a nightclub early this morning.
Within hours of the scuffle, it was headlining the tabloids. Harry lashed out, yelling, "Why don't you just leave me alone?"
Everything that was happening in the UK was so intense. I was trying to balance the whole experience of being a young boy who was trying to deal with the loss of his mum without much support or help or guidance. It didn't seem right. It didn't seem fair.
Okay, let's throw it around the room one time and talk about what we think we've seen. And Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so look, he was an icon, he was royalty, he was a symbol of something. He's decided to leave that with his new wife. Now they are both looking to create a new iconography, become stars of another type. But what light are they going to throw? Where are they going to guide us? Where are they taking us? I'm not quite sure at this point. It could be an interesting story over time. I might well tune into it. And certainly, if you like and subscribe, there's potentially more to come. Chase?
I hope not. But, this is the opposite of what people tend to see on Netflix. We tend to see things that are not boring and not predictable leading the way on Netflix. This is the opposite of those. And I guess this backlash is continuing to grow, and I don't know much about it. It's a lot like the Oprah interview, though. It's empty. It's lacking in any possible real detail, and it's just narrowly focused on just building this narrative of suffering. And I honest to God, wish they would use this platform to help people feel more gratitude instead of just disgust and sympathy. I have no doubt in real life they're relatively normal. I'm no expert on the royal family, but I am an expert on influence and persuasion. And this is a champion level piece of work with a very crafted delivery. I'm sure that will be very persuasive to lots of people. Greg?
Yeah, what I see here is a guy who's disgruntled with obvious reason and who has been the focal point of a nation's feelings. What better person to become a social justice warrior and to have a plan for where they want to go next? I haven't seen the rest of this video, so I'm not giving you any heads up. I don't know what happens after this, but if I were crafting a star child to be my spokesman for everything that he fell from, what a powerful message. And the guy who really, really, really wants to be away from all that stuff doesn't run to the cameras. I'm suspicious. Scott, what do you got?
Okay, back to your point, Chase, about being boring. What we realized today when Greg and I were talking on the phone, that we called back and forth about 9 times, talking about, well, you know what she thinks. Well, you know what he said. Well, she thinks this and he thinks that. You know what he's going to do next. Here's what's going to happen. That's what we did every time we called. We were doing what everybody else is doing when they're watching this, as we're complaining about it.
I was drinking cooking oil.
Oh man, yeah. So you're right, Chase. There's something to that. Something's up. So, but I think this is a great study in seeing someone who is trying to find his mom. So he's trying to put her in this horrible thing that he can rescue her from. And there's no horrible thing for her to be in. There's nothing there. And we're seeing this really weird situation of, we don't like people knowing about us, taking our pictures and stuff, how horrible. And they're like, we're doing a documentary about us. We're going to show you and tell you everything. It's just the whole thing just smashes together. It just doesn't seem right. And maybe that's the key. Maybe that's what's making it so popular. All right,
wait till episode 2. Wait till episode 2. The horror will come.
Scott, there's a name for that.
What is it?
It's called White Knight Syndrome.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
We'll put a link down there.
Yeah. All right. All right, fellas. I think this was another good one, and we'll see you next time.
The Behavior Panel.
All right, let's hurry up and get finished with this Miley Cyrus thing.
Oh, yeah, with you.
We'll move on.
Okay.
Because how many videos were there, Chase or Greg?
I got 3, 1 through 3.
Yep, okay. Yep. I thought we were going to keep 5 and get rid of 3 and just do 1, 2, 4, and 5. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Because I don't think I can take more than that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Because I spent a lot of time on these. I mean, it's all about
what are they?
The Miley Cyrus. All right. Today we're going to talk about Miley Cyrus. And with you, Mark.
So what do you got? Hey yo. You know what?